Hello everyone, bit of a big bit of news today. It seems, and it appears, that the viewing figures for Doctor Who on Disney Plus, at least Season 1, the 60th, and the start of Season 2, have been leaked. They were posted up to Gallifrey Base, and then incredibly quickly deleted, but thankfully, some people over on Reddit have captured them for our viewing convenience. So we're going to be looking at these numbers and kind of trying to determine, like, what these numbers actually mean and, like, you know, how they compare to other things, and if they really kind of were as bad as maybe, you know, they seemed to be, obviously because Disney pulled out of the deal, or what's going on. So we're going to be going right into it, but before we do, subscribe if you're new, that would be greatly appreciated. We do regular Doctor Who content here on the channel, and any support would be greatly appreciated. But let's dive right in. So here it is, Disney ratings in r/Doctor Who News by Outrageous View 5675. Taken down by Gallifrey Base, a mate of mine managed to grab a screen grab, and we are very, very grateful. So, this graph covers all of the episodes up till the Robot Revolution, according to this. And so the graph shows, if you look at it here at the top, for some reason it cuts off the top when I go the big screen mode. But if you look at the top there, it says week, as in, so you've got 4 weeks there, it's 4-week performance, so week by week by week, the numbers that it was streamed. So you've got the title of the episode, streams in minutes, which is how most of these get calculated, view duration, duration of the episode, and then views. What I'm interested in is views, because I'll be honest, I don't really know how to, like, calculate relative minutes watched. Someone else will probably do a better job of that and compare it to, like, what other shows did. But the bit I'm interested in is views. So first of all, taking a look at the 60th specials. The Starbase debuted in its first week to 700,000 viewers overall, and with a 4-week total of 2.1 million. Now this is interesting because this is the highest that Doctor Who got. For some reason this graph, or this graphic, leaves out Wild Yonder, but the second one in this thread does include it. There's a second screenshot, which I will show. It actually puts it alongside the Disney viewing figures. So you can see here, BBC 8.37, 28-day BBC figure, 4-week figure for Disney, 2.14. Wild Blue Yonder, 8.3 million on BBC, 1.04 on Disney. The Giggle, 1.03, about the same. Church on Ruby Road, 8 million almost, pretty much, on the BBC, just under 1 million on Disney. So yeah, the trajectory is very much downwards. What I find interesting, though, is that the 60th was pretty well received over here, and did fairly well. But outside of the Starbase, there was a pretty massive drop-off, and then, basically, throughout the Gatwa season, it starts off just over 1.4 million, and then 1.2 million for Devil's Cord, and then there's a massive drop from Devil's Cord to Boom, with Boom scoring 700,000 viewers after 4 weeks. 73 Yards, sorry, with about 1 million after 4 weeks. 73 Yards did get a bit of social media hype and a bit of buzz, so I'm assuming that accounts for the boost. Dot and Bubble, 979,000 compared to 3.82 million on the BBC in the UK. Rogue, 3.89, and 922,000. The Legendary Sunday, 938,000. Empire Death, 656,000. Interesting that there's a big drop before the finale, like before people had seen what the finale was like. Maybe bad word of mouth of the finale really did tank the final episode, potentially. Joy to the World, 6.38 million, BBC 28-day figure. Disney 4-week figure, 613,000. And then Robot Revolution, 4 million, UK 28-day, 615,000 on Disney+. So I assume this is worldwide. Now, it's difficult to really compare these numbers to anything, really, because Disney are a lot more private when it comes to their numbers, and the only reason we have these is, I think, because someone leaked them. But what I find interesting, obviously, I assume this is worldwide outside of the UK, so worth bearing that in mind. Obviously, I tried to have a look to compare to other shows within, like, the Disney remit, mainly the Marvel shows. Now, obviously, this is a different kettle of fish altogether, But here we have the number of Marvel Disney Plus series premieres in the United States as of June 2023 in millions. So this is, in the United States, so it's not counting the rest of the world, that's probably worth saying, the numbers that each Marvel show launched to in their first, I believe, 5 days. So as you can see here, Loki is at the top, 2.5 million, Falcon and Winter Soldier 1.8, Moon Knight, similar, 1.8. WandaVision, 1.6. That one went up quite a bit afterwards, though, I think. Hawkeye, 1.5. She-Hulk, 1.5. Secret Invasion, just under 1 million. And then Miss Marvel, about 700,000. So, here's what I'm wondering. I want to know how good Doctor Who had to do in order to be considered viable. Because looking at these numbers for the Disney Plus shows, at least from a British perspective, and again, it's worth saying these are the US numbers in the first 5 days, rather than obviously the numbers that Doctor Who was getting after 4 weeks globally. So they aren't comparable, but we can compare the first week numbers, because that's about the same. So, like, the Star Beast got 700,000 viewers in its first week. Space Babies got about the same, 784. It actually got more, actually, because that was the proper premiere when they were really trying to push it. You know, the 60th was kind of just an extra thing. That was what it launched with in the States, 784,000, I say States, worldwide as well. And of course, in the United States alone, Miss Marvel launched to a similar number. Obviously, Miss Marvel being their lowest performing one. But, like, obviously Doctor Who isn't a Marvel property. And it wouldn't have cost anywhere near as much as a Marvel property. So what I'm curious to know is, how well did Doctor Who have to do to be seen as worth reinvesting in moving forwards? Because, as I say, outside of, like, the UK perspective, where we're used to kind of getting discourse over the show going under, like, you know, 3-4 million viewers, the idea of seeing these numbers in the UK, in the US, for Marvel shows only being around like 2.5 at the high end for basically their first week, and on the low end about 700,000, it makes me wonder, like, how much worse did Doctor Who actually do comparative? Obviously, again, the big thing with this is that this is only the US. I did look up worldwide numbers for the Marvel shows, but again, they're a lot more kind of secretive about that, which is why I had to go back to 2023 to find these. But, like, you've got to bear in mind, even looking at something like Agatha All Along here, it's worth bearing in mind that, obviously, they still considered it a hit, apparently, according to this article, despite being Disney's second lowest viewed MCU show. And apparently that cost $40 million for 9 episodes, and that was considered on the cheap end for an MCU show. I don't know what the actual number was for Doctor Who total per series. I can't imagine it was, like, much more than that or anything like that. So it just makes me wonder, how well did Doctor Who have to do to be justified? Obviously, when you look at something like Secret Invasion not hitting 1 million in its first 5 days in the States, costing 212 million, obviously Doctor Who was not close to that. It makes me wonder if the real issue wasn't so much the numbers themselves, but what we've kind of speculated before about maybe the people who were going on there to watch Disney Plus, to watch Doctor Who on Disney Plus, weren't sticking around to watch anything else. They were watching Doctor Who and then leaving, which obviously Disney don't want. But again, it's one of those things where, in all fairness, can you really blame Doctor Who for that? Yeah, it only seems to be able to show, like, basically just US numbers, unfortunately, which is a bit of a shame. I'd love to know the worldwide numbers for the Marvel shows. If anyone knows them, then I would be very curious to know them. But from what I can tell, I can only find the US numbers. But I have to imagine that a huge chunk of the audience for Doctor Who on Disney Plus would have probably been America, right? Like, presumably. Obviously, the fact that, like I say, every other territory is also included is a point in, like, against Doctor Who's favour, because obviously it wasn't matching the lowest of the Marvel shows with every other country as well as just the States. But I don't know, like, I want to know what level to what Doctor Who needed to perform at to be considered viable for them, because looking at this, it doesn't seem, like, ridiculously out of line, because it's worth saying as well, as I said, Doctor Who is not Marvel, it is not Star Wars. To expect it to perform like that was always going to be naive, so I'm just curious what level they needed it to do to be considered a success. I don't know. It's hard looking at numbers like this, because, like, they look low, but we also don't really have much to properly compare it to. I think the interesting thing is that the show never really had like a huge boost, even before, like, because people will say that, oh, you know, Space Babies tanked it or whatever, but even just looking at like Church, even just looking at Star Beast, you know, the first episode of The Deal peaking at like 2 million after, you know, a month, and obviously 700,000 in its first week. That's not huge, you know, and it makes me wonder, like, was there ever enough interest to sustain a deal worth this? I don't know, because the 60th, at least, whatever your opinion on the Gatwa era was, the 60th was relatively well received stateside. Maybe one of the issues is American and other territories didn't have the context available to them for the other stuff, potentially. That's why. But I don't know. I find this fascinating. But obviously, it's difficult for me to really determine. I mean, obviously, this wasn't enough for Disney, otherwise, they wouldn't have canned it. But I just want to know what would have been considered good. Because, like, obviously, this wasn't. But looking at, like, the Marvel numbers I could find, they weren't, like, insane either. Okay, so having a look at this, it says Daredevil Born Again performed well on Disney Plus, opening with 7.5 million viewers across 5 days. Obviously, that is insanely high. Previous MCU series, Agatha All Along, premiered to 9.3 million viewers across its 7 days. Okay, so it seems then like the US numbers are not actually the biggest part of like the Marvel pie, which I was actually kind of surprised by. Okay, so this is US viewership of every live-action Star Wars and Marvel series on Disney Plus. Methodology, weekly average in millions of complete viewing equivalents. Okay, so this is the weekly average for these shows. Okay, so Daredevil Born Again Season 2 seems to be the absolute lowest, with about 4 million on average. So yeah, that is a lot higher still than what Doctor Who was getting, I suppose. But again, it's worth saying things like Daredevil and Andor, even though they probably would be on the cheaper end for Disney, are still way more than what Doctor Who would be, presumably. So I really don't know. But again, it's like, I don't know how much better they were really expecting it to do. Like, obviously it was never going to do Marvel or Star Wars numbers. Was it literally just a case of, it's not doing Marvel or Star Wars numbers, so let's just nix it? I don't know. You know, like, I don't know. This is from Reddit, by the way. This is where I'm taking this graph from, the Disney Plus Reddit. So take that with a grain of salt. This is just the same graph. So do they only release the worldwide figures when they look good? That seems to be kind of the impression that I'm getting. Is that the worldwide figures only seem to get dropped when they want to show them. I don't know. Yeah, the moral of the story is the numbers were definitely lower than all of the MCU stuff and the Star Wars stuff by quite a wide margin, but again, was that particularly surprising? The other interesting thing I find is that even before the deal really started, the interest wasn't like colossally big. It was there, you know, there was like 2 million to start with, but that's not like loads, you know, like it's enough to where I can imagine another streaming service wanting to pick it up for cheap, but not to the point where you would want to spend as much as they presumably did on it, which is still way less than what they would have spent on Marvel shows, but still. Again, for something they don't own as well, I suppose can't profit off of in the same way, I guess, as well. Also thought it was worth adding this in post. Obviously, we don't have all of Season 2 on these graphs, but you can even just see just from Robot Revolution that it's way lower than where Season 1 started. Obviously, 600,000 viewers after 4 weeks. Just under 400,000 in the first week for Robot Revolution. So obviously, it would probably continue downwards. But it's also worth saying that Season 2 got basically no promotion from Disney for its release, really, from what I understand. Like, Season 1, in fairness to them, had a big push, which I think explains, like, why these numbers are basically double what these are. But, like, yeah, what's interesting, though, is Joy to the World and Robot Revolution, despite one being a Christmas episode, which you would think would kind of bolster it, were pretty much, like, identical in terms of their actual, like, watch amount, which I find rather interesting in terms of, like, actual views. So maybe, like, about 500,000 was kind of the absolute, like, that's, like, the lowest sort of level to where, like, you know, about 500,000 could be guaranteed to watch it in its first month. Which, again, isn't, like, great, but it's sort of that thing of, like, if you made the show cheaper, I could see a streaming service thinking that was worth their time. It's just, was it worth a big mega Disney partnership? Probably not with numbers like that, but again, I don't really know. What do you guys think? This was a very interesting sort of read and a very interesting sort of look, but like, yeah. Let me know what you guys think. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you later.